What's up guys, Kyle here again, and today we are taking a look at the Bugera Trirec Infinium. Let's do it! Alright guys, hope you're doing great out there today. If this is your first time here at my channel, my name is Kyle, and what I do is I take awesome high gain amplifiers, guitars, cabinets, overdrives, I record them with a simple SM57 setup, and I give you the unprocessed audio on your end. So if you like E-standard thrash riffs, drop C hardcore riffs, and dudes that can't wait for this video to be over so they can go eat Moe's, you're in the right place. Consider hitting the like button and subscribing on your way out so you don't miss any more of my stuff. Thanks! So today we are taking a look at the Bugera Trirec. I have long been interested in the Bugera stuff just from a curiosity standpoint, as the amps that they clone or copy, or however you want to put it, they're not exact copies, but they're pretty close, are amps that I love. The PV-XXX, the Mesa Dual Rectifier, which is what this is supposed to be a clone of, and the 5150 or 6505 series are all what comes to mind when I think of the Bugera amps, because those are the amps that they essentially copied. So with the Trirec, it's a little goofy. I'm sure that they were probably trying to avoid copyright stuff by naming it this, but it's essentially a dual rectifier clone. It's not a triple rectifier clone because the triple rectifier is 150 watts. It's got 3 rectifier tubes in it, but the Trirec, I guess, applies to the 3 different rectification modes, as you've got silicon diode rectification, valve rectification, and on this amp you can actually combine the two, which on the Mesa amps, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe that that is an option to combine the two. I believe it's only one or the other. So anyways, yeah, that opening clip that you guys heard, I was using a KHDK Ghoul Screamer in front of the amp to boost it and nothing else, and I actually think that this thing sounds awesome. It doesn't sound exactly like a rectifier. It really doesn't. It's tighter. It's got a lot more just upper mid, high-end presence than a regular rectifier would have, and the gain just seems to be a little bit more fluid. There's definitely the rectifier DNA in there all day. You can hear it, but it does sound pretty significantly different than my rectifiers that I own. So because there's so much going on in this amp, I'm gonna kind of try to just shut up and jump into the actual demo portion, because I do tend to talk too much. We're gonna take a look at the drive section on channel 1, and then we're gonna move directly over into channel 2 and channel 3. Typically I would put everything at noon, but because we have so many different settings to go over on this, I'm just gonna try to dial in some different tones on each channel and each setting of each channel and explain to you the functions of the amp. That way this thing doesn't get too long-winded. For the cabinet, I have my Mezzabarba 412 that has Celestion UK Vintage 30s and redbacks in it. The SM57 is miking the Celestion Vintage 30. And then I also am playing my Balaguer Typhon prototype guitar with the new Balaguer Hypernova pickups, which are sort of like a modern high output pickup. So with all that crap being said, let's go ahead and go over to channel number 1 on the drive channel, and let's just see how it sounds. One thing I would like to mention before we do jump into all the tones and everything, this has a vary power control, which essentially acts as like an attenuator, but not really. It really just kind of seems to affect the amount of signal that is going into the power amp on this amp. If you have that vary power all the way up, this thing is insanely loud, like insanely loud. I had the master and the channel volumes both at 1 out of 10 with that vary power all the way up, and it just was already too loud, and it was super fizzy. So I kind of found a sweet spot that's just over noon, where it allows me to put a little bit of volume from the power amp and a little bit of volume from the whatever channel that I'm on, and kind of fine tune things a little bit. So there's also a built-in boost in here, which I will show you guys. But for the most part, we're gonna leave that off and rely on external boosts, because this doesn't really work all that great in my opinion. So this is channel 1 on the drive setting. overall, not bad. It's definitely kind of fat, but I do have the gain all the way up. So let's roll that gain back and just see if we can get kind of like a decent crunch tone. Okay, so that thins it out quite a bit, gives it kind of like a quackiness that I actually think sounds pretty good. Let's do it just above noon. That sounds honestly pretty good. If you're going for like a classic rock type thing, it's not a bad sound. On the Mesa rectifiers, I tend to really like the pushed setting, which would be the same as the drive setting on this amp. For those lower gain type tones, it's just, it's pretty open, it's pretty organic compared to the rest of the amp. I think it sounds really good. If we were to pull back the treble a little bit, that would give us a little bit less quackiness. If we pull the mids back, then it starts to sound pretty different. It definitely makes it sound a little bit more fat and dark. So as you can tell, the crunch stuff sounds pretty good, but this is Belligerent Amateur Central, and we go to Metaltown for our demos. We don't do any of this pushed dad rock bull crap. All right, guys, so we're gonna start channel 2 on the classic mode, and I'm just gonna leave everything set as is and play a couple things and see how it sounds. That is actually a really cool classic rock type sound. It needs a little bit more high end, but it's got a really cool thing going on in the low mids that just gives it a little bit more of a growl than say like something a classic Marshall would sound like. So that's pretty cool overall. It's definitely kind of an interesting tone. It doesn't really remind me of the, I forget what it's called on the raw setting on the Rectifier. It's kind of fatter, but stringier on the top at the same time. Honestly, that's a pretty cool sounding tone. So that is interesting. Again, not gonna do too much there because we're not here for the lower gain tones. Let's go ahead and see how it sounds on the vintage mode. This is where the gain starts to come in. The gain is right around noon, a little under. Okay, so on this setting, it seems to keep a lot of that same like low, mid, fat tonality, but it is way tighter than a dual rectifier would ever be without a boost out front. This thing is super tight on the low end in comparison, and I actually kind of like that, and it does have kind of a unique thing going on in the voicing. Like I said, it's got this kind of weird like low, mid roundness that doesn't sound bloated. It just gives it kind of like a throaty type tone, if that makes any sense at all. All right, we're gonna go ahead and bump that gain up a little bit more. I'm gonna pull the low end a little bit back, and I'm going to pull the treble back and up the presence. I forgot where that chord starts. There it is. But anyways, yeah, that sounds really cool. It's got this I don't know, like I said, it's like a stringiness in the mids. On the dual rectifier, I tend to live on the vintage mode on channel 2 if I'm playing a 3-channel with a boost out front. So this is kind of where I would call home on a normal rectifier. So let's go ahead, kick an overdrive in. We're gonna turn the gain back down a little bit, and let's see how that sounds. So yeah, definitely a lot of mid content. It definitely has more mid content than a standard rectifier would, and I kind of like it for that, because I always feel like the thing for me that is missing from a dual rectifier is that it just doesn't seem to have enough presence in the upper mids like I normally like. I'm a modded Marshall or an old school PV type guy, and both of those amps are known for having kind of crazy upper mid presence. So that is where the rectifier has always kind of lacked, but this sounds really good. One thing I am noticing though, if you're a fan of the Mesa rectifier sound, this amp doesn't have the same low end reaction. It doesn't have that big round tubby low end that a dual rectifier does. It's got a big low end, but it's not that wall of sound low end that you're used to from a rectifier. It's definitely tighter. Now, my Mezza Barba cab is definitely overbuilt. It's a really stout and stiff cab, so that could have something to do with it. But at the same time, this cab has low end for days with the redbacks, and I'm not getting that same kind of big, pronounced low and sub-low low end that you would find from a rectifier, even with the bass dialed way up. The lows are there, they're just more focused and punchy than they would be on a regular rectifier. So we are gonna go to the modern setting. We're gonna turn my boost off, and let's see how that sounds. Really, really bright. So one thing that I did notice is the modern setting on a regular rectifier is gonna be bright, but it's definitely not like this. Like, I literally have to turn the treble back and the presence way back in order to get to a place where this amp is not overbearing in the high end. And even then, it's just like, let's turn everything completely down. It's got some really, really bitey top end frequencies going on. So it's a little harder to EQ in a balanced manner where it's not like over the top on the top end. I don't know what happened there. But anyways, let's turn the gain up. As you guys can tell, this is extremely tight with no boost out front. Again, it still kind of has that same low mid kind of roundness going on, and it's got an upper mid presence that is definitely not usually apparent on rectifiers. Let's see if we can get a scooped recto tone by bumping the bass up, pulling the mids out. That's where a lot of the brightness is coming from. That mid control has a lot of upper mids to it. There's your classic rectifier red channel sound right there. So yeah, definitely the mids play a big part in the overall EQ of this amp, more so than they would on a regular rectifier. I know I keep saying that and it probably sounds redundant, but there are a lot of differences to this thing for sure. right, before we run out of time, let's go ahead and go over to channel 3 here and see if there are any major differences. Let's start on the modern, since that's where we just were on channel 2, and kind of set things the same. See if we notice any major shifts in the tone of the amp. No, it's not brighter. It actually seems more muffled on the top end in comparison with similar settings. All right, so it seems like it's more fluid in the gain. It also it does have that mid thing going on, same mid thing as the other channel. One of the things that usually sets the red channel apart from the orange channel on a rectifier is the red channel has the negative feedback circuit taken out, so that presence is a lot brighter to start with than it is on channel 2. So with things set pretty much all the same, and me actually feeling like this channel might be a little bit darker with the same settings, that's interesting. It's almost like they took the channels and either cloned them or made some slight alterations to the EQ here, but didn't take the negative feedback out of the circuit on this channel. Interesting either way. It does sound a little bit different to my ears. There's like an inherent quackiness in this amp that you just can't quite dial out, so that's kind of strange. All right, so really it sounds pretty much the same to me overall as the other channel did. Let's go ahead and kick the built-in boost in. So the boost actually seems like it's gonna be like your clean or line level type boost, where it's just adding output in the front end of the amp. It seemed to add a little bit of saturation, but overall it just added some fullness, and that just leads me to believe that it's just kind of pushing the signal into the preamp a little bit more. Let's go back to the vintage mode. Let's dial in one more good tone. So far, I've had a lot of fun with it. I hope that you guys did too watching this video. So anyways, I'm gonna shut up because I am talking too much, just like I said I would. One more thing before we go. Let's turn this very power down a little bit. Let's see what it sounds like with the master higher. Not good. It's creating a lot of weird noise, so let's try the channel volume higher now. All right, so when you have the very power turned that far down, it starts to introduce a lot of noise when the volumes are cranked, so that's not really a good indication of what things are actually gonna sound like. Yeah, so it seems like it adds a little bit more broad mids when you turn the master volume up, but it sounds like it adds a little bit more punch and a little bit more saturation when you turn the channel volume up. Last but not least, I'm gonna turn that very power up kinda high, like 3/4 of the way. So yeah, like I said, it seems like adding a little bit more channel volume over the master volume makes it a little bit punchier, but when you up the master volume, it seems to just kind of get rid of some of those kind of crazy midtones that I was also talking about too. So it's all about the fine-tuning act between the two to dial it to where you want it. All right, guys, that is gonna do it for me today on the Bugera Trirec Infinium. What did you think? What did you guys hear on the other end of the microphone that I didn't hear here in the room? I'm really curious to see what you guys think. Do you think that this amp sounds good? Do you think it's a good budget option for those out there who are looking for an all-tube amplifier in the vein of a Mesa Dual Rectifier but can't quite put together the money to be able to afford one? I personally do think so, but I understand if you don't. Regardless of how you feel, put it down in the comments and I'll meet you guys down there to talk about it. Again, if you liked the video, please do me a huge favor, hit the like button, consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss any more of my stuff. And if you want to support the channel, which I would very much appreciate, down in the description are my affiliate links to things like Sweetwater and Amazon. Click on that Sweetwater affiliate link and anything that you buy in the next 2 weeks, I will get a little bit of a commission off of. Greatly helps me out and I would appreciate you forever. On top of that, I also have a belligerent amateur community with a Discord server and a Facebook group down in the description as well. Click on those and consider joining up to either of those. I would love to have you guys around to talk about gear all the time. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Kyle here again. We'll see you next time.